Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that today's session will be recorded. Today, we're going to share some insights and some best practices on how food and beverage companies can plan for international expansion. And I think we all know that expanding your business to new markets can be a lucrative option for growth, but it's important to also have the right strategy and the right approach. So really what we wanted to talk to you about today was some of those potential strategies to consider if you are contemplating expansion into global markets. And we also wanted to share some of the potential challenges that you might face along the way. My name is Rosanna Lamanna. I'm a partner at Fuller Landau, a full-service audit, tax, and advisory firm, and I'm also the leader of our food and beverage group here out of Toronto. I have the pleasure of supporting several of our firm's food and beverage companies with not only their financial reporting and tax needs, but I've also helped companies develop and execute on their growth strategies, be it acquiring new businesses, expanding into new geographies within Canada, or even abroad. So our team at Fuller Landau is well positioned to help. But today I'm here with Ashley and Jessica from Export Development Canada, also known as EDC. I think most refer to it as EDC. They'll share their insights on how they've helped companies successfully expand their operations internationally, and also share a little bit about how EDC can play a pivotal role in allowing food and beverage companies tap into additional financing to support their international expansion plan. So Ashley, maybe I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit about yourself with our audience.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ashley Canary. I've been in the food business for 40 years. I know I don't look that old, but I am. And I've kind of worked my way up from the bottom. I started working in stores and sales management, executive management, investing, and now I'm here at EDC. My core role is running EDC's agri-food strategy, and I run our ag food team. So I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Russell, a Senior Relationship Manager at Export Development Canada, and also the Food and Beverage Lead for Ontario. So I'm working really closely with all my colleagues on the ground across Ontario to make sure that I bring insights to them, keep them up to date on trends and ways that we can help support the food and beverage industry, and maybe even come along for rides or find opportunities for them. So my role is more of a supportive role, but also one where I do manage my own book of diverse portfolio in my region, which is Simcoe County, Muskoka, up to Parry Sound, but also covering the food and beverage sector for Ontario. Send it back over to you, Rosanna.
Great, thanks Jessica and Ashley, and thanks again for joining us today. Before we sort of dive into that, exploring the international expansion, I think it's important just to give a brief snapshot of what the food and beverage industry looks like right here in Canada. As you can see, the food and beverage processing industry in Canada is actually one of the largest manufacturing industries within Canada, and sales of manufactured goods is approximately $157 billion, which accounts for about 18% of our total manufacturing sales in Canada. So it is quite significant. But not all that we manufacture here in Canada stays in Canada. Our food processing sector relies heavily on exports. And Canadian companies do export to almost 200 countries around the world. So that's a lot of countries, but a significant proportion of their exports are really going to only a handful of countries, being the US, China, and Japan, which round up sort of our three main export markets. But you can see based on the percentages, we primarily export to Canada primarily export to the United States from Canada, representing almost like 80% of our exports, which really at the end of the day is not really a surprise, given that the US is in such close proximity to Canada, which makes it really easy to transfer goods across borders. We also know the US has a much larger population than Canada does, which helps fuel demand. The US has fairly similar business practices, among other things. So just very easy market to potentially expand into if you're looking to step outside of Canada. If we're looking internationally, the food and beverage industry is well poised for growth. You'll see, sorry, I think we advanced the slide a little. Yeah, no worries. You'll see that, here, there's some stats from Agriculture Canada, which suggests that 11.8% is the expected global annual growth rate between the years 2022 to 2027 in the food and beverage industry. And from what I hear, it's actually the global population is projected to increase to about 10 billion by the year 2050. So this in itself presents a significant opportunity on an international level for food and beverage companies to help support some of this increased demand. And then lastly, you can see just from some stats on the slide that, over the past few years, there has been an overall increase in exports in general. So when we're talking a little bit about sort of food trends and looking forward, there seems to be a renewed focus on some of the private label, and that in itself is a growing market. Plant-based protein trend continues to evolve, and I think innovation's been really important to a lot of companies in order to support survival of brands. But Ashley, maybe you can share with us what you're seeing within the food sector in terms of areas of focus and what some of the opportunities may be.
Yeah, thank you, Rosanna. So put together a little chart here just to talk about what's our core focus from our agri-food team. So about a year and a bit ago, we set three core pillars, for us, and to support what Rosanna was just saying. We chose three things: private label, plant-based protein in both branded and private label, and innovation in both branded and private label. So when we look at those three areas, we felt that narrowing our focus into those three parts of the business, as opposed to focusing on everything food-wise, gave us a far better approach to dig deep and support Canadian companies as they grew. And we saw those as huge opportunities. So when we looked at the total food business, we broke it down into two sectors. We called it farm to factory and factory to consumer. And what does that mean? So the farm to factory is everything from the seed to the plant and everything in between. So these are all the primary, crops and things like that: farming, livestock, seafood in its raw form as it goes into a manufacturing facility. Then you would have a bit of a convergence there, and from a processing standpoint, and then the product becomes to what we classify as factory to consumer. Then you would get finished goods that comes out of that, and then we look at the finished product itself, distribution, retailers, and then ultimately the end consumer who buys the product from that. Traditionally speaking, in the farm to factory space, there's a lot of large companies out there, huge crop manufacturers, very, very large processors. In the factory to consumer segment, there are a lot of medium-sized companies that we think that are in the between $10 to $300 million a year in sales. That is the primary group that tends to fit into that segment. Of course, we are very focused on ESG, and the reason why is retailers around the world and companies around the world that want to do business with Canada expect you to be ESG compliant, and we bring that lens to all that we do, and it's important. People will ask you for that, so we always say be ready. Inside each of these two areas, we've chosen some focus. In the farm to factory space, it's about automation and scaling up a production, and it's about bringing ag tech into that, and even things like fertilizer. There's new non-chemical ways of fertilizing the soil and things of this nature, and then value-added processing. So as this is today, the majority of Canada's commodities we ship abroad as they are. You'll ship all your wheat or your pulses or your grain, but someone else processes them and then sells them back to Canada, and all of that middle profit is gone. And what we're looking to do here is to focus on supporting value-added processing. So we say, why sell the canola when you can make canola oil and sell that right here in Canada? And that goes across a number of other areas. Of course, the majority of what Canada sells today is commodity-based, so we still focus on that, and we want to make sure that we are building out new markets for Canada's commodities, and we try to open up more doors. So in the factory to consumer space, it's about mobilizing knowledge and networks. The number one thing that people say to us is, who do I talk to? Could you find somebody to introduce me to? So that's about awareness for us. And we have teams around the world, and we can bring that awareness to Canadian companies to help demystify the process of expanding abroad. Partnerships and outreach. I think that that is very important. Canada has a really wide network. We have seats in pretty much every embassy around the world, and I believe we're north of 45 or 47 offices currently, globally, and more opening. Which means we have feet on the street and local representation to help you understand the markets that you'd like to go to, and maybe even suggest a few to you that you hadn't thought of before. In that consumer space, we're still focused on things like private label, branded plant-based protein, and then innovation. When I say innovation, it's about, could be even renovation, new packaging, new formats, biodegradable things. There's more and more pressure being put on the types of packaging that we have, single-use plastics. Finding other things to replace that in the market. That's important. It'll come up. So we have to be ready. And of course, I think those are the top few things that we're focused on currently. So maybe Roseanne, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ashley, for that. I mean, that was, I think you've got some really good insights there, in particular when we talk about, readiness and how to expand to new markets. I just kind of think about the do your homework piece, knowing your market, understanding some of the local laws and regulations. Here in Canada, we have food safety regulation. What's the equivalent in the jurisdiction that you're potentially looking to expand to, and what competition looks like, what are consumer preferences, because they do change around the world. And obviously, when you're looking at expansion, you're looking at, resources and what you may need. But, it's easy to say to expand it, is going to create growth, but there's a lot of work that has to happen behind the scenes and a lot of conversations to get there. And also knowing what some of the risks might be to companies and being able to manage some of those risks. So I know, Jessica, when companies are looking to expand in new markets, and we've talked about some of those risks and what they might be, could you maybe highlight some of those for our audience and maybe suggest some ways that they could potentially mitigate some of the risks of expanding abroad?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think first though, I just wanted to do your homework part. I think we just need to touch a bit more about that. And an export plan is really important for not only for the company to understand what risks exist, but how, what the lay of the land is, how they're going to, enter that market, whether it be through distributors or whether they have salespeople or brokers. Like, there's a lot to think about prior to even, and also selection of a country. There's a lot of things to think about before even starting to talk to buyers or in those markets. So I think do your homework is really important. And I do want to mention one thing before we get started here is that there is the Trade Accelerator program that EDC is a national sponsor for. You can go online and check it out. And what it does is brings all the right people into a format where you can help to work towards building that export plan for yourself. And so doing that homework, sometimes what happens is we get busy work doing all the other things in our business and forget to do the thinking part and do the actual work. So what that does, the Trade Accelerator program, is makes you sit down, brings you all the specialists in to bring you to talk to you and educate you on the parts of the export plan. But then also at the end of it, you should have an export plan actually compiled. So that's one great thing. So once you have the export plan, I think there's lots of things that you need to consider, right? So things like, how do you mitigate risk? So you're now entering into a new market. You're now entering into a new relationship with a brand new buyer that you've never talked to before. You don't know how to vet them. How do you know that they're strong? How do you know that they're going to pay? You're entering into a new market with new traditions, ways of doing business. So there's lots of things to consider. And so at EDC, we help to mitigate risk. So how do we do that? Well, we can help you vet that buyer so you can get comfortable with them. Hey, is this buyer creditworthy? Are they going to be able to pay me? If so, can I offer them terms? So EDC has a way you can vet companies, and also you can get insurance on them. So you can sell to them with confidence that giving them terms, maybe 30, 60 days to pay, you will get payment at the end of it. And if you don't, the insurance covers up to 90% of that sale. So it's a huge benefit to mitigate that one risk. There's also risk that you enter into a new company, never dealt with them, and you're maybe changing the way that you sell. The product might look different for this buyer. You might be doing, a private label for them. And all of a sudden now you only can resell to that buyer. There's a huge risk. The risk is that in the event they cancel a contract, how do you mitigate that risk? You can't resell that product. So, there is ways to mitigate that risk through EDC's insurance. We can cover contract cancellation. So it gives you peace of mind. The moment you start incurring costs for that contract to the moment you get paid or not get paid, you have coverage the entire time. So those are some ways to mitigate risk. I think, just educating yourself. We have a plethora of information at edc.ca. You can sign up for My EDC, which is an account. You give, it's free. You sign up and then you have all access to all white papers, information on countries, tells you whether the country we're open to that country, meaning we can help you, support you in that country or not. Gives a lot of information. So I would say absolutely go to our website and sign up for that. And also talk to your local rep. I'm happy to have any chat with anybody after to talk through exact ways to mitigate risk. I'll just give an example. We had a company that was really excited. They had landed their first retailer in the US. They were having to make a lot of the product because obviously they had to make enough for the first PO, but then they say they have to have enough for restocking. So they go ahead and start to make the product for this retailer in the US. It was for Kroger. And all of a sudden they came to me one day and said, I'm really nervous, Jessica. I don't know that I'll get paid. Of course, Kroger's not going anywhere, hopefully, but I'm now doing different things for them. My packaging looks different. How do I mitigate that risk? And so they were really forthcoming and they decided to get insurance. The insurance didn't cost very much at all. They were able to get peace of mind that they can sell to that buyer with these different standards for their packaging and continue to have manufacture to restock because they had that insurance in place. So just gives you peace of mind. Go ahead and sell. It's worth it to spend maybe 1% of your profit to make sure that you're going to get 90% at the end of the day at worst case scenario.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think, Jessica, one of the points you made was just talking about looking at growing outside of Canada and helping maybe assess what sort of countries you may want to consider as an opportunity. And so maybe, Ashley, do you want to talk about the tips that you might have for Canadian companies that are looking to grow outside and maybe what countries you think there might be the greatest opportunity for food and beverage companies?
Yeah, for sure. When you're going outside of Canada, the first one is give us a call, and we can help you develop that plan to find out what countries are best for your specific products, because it does vary, right? We have relationships around the world, and the knowledge to help demystify the process of exporting. We actually believe the biggest opportunities right now lie within 3 areas, which is the U.S. Obviously, it's so similar in ways of doing business, good population base, and similar customers who identify with Canada and Canadian products. Not to mention geographical perfection. The number 2 one for us is the Indo-Pacific region. So we're putting significant effort behind this area as well, because we need to give Canadian companies access to the 4 billion people that are living there. And that area of the world is growing faster than anywhere else globally. So Canada needs to be there. And number 3 for us is Europe. So they lead the way in private label store penetration and plant-based product acceptance, which is 2 of our core pillars. So Canada is well positioned to be a supplier and supporter of European countries overall. So that's where I see the 3 biggest areas of growth for us and places where Canada should be looking.
And then I know, Jessica, you've helped several companies obtain financing to help support their export strategy. Perhaps there's some companies out there that may not even know the role that EDC can play in conjunction with the lender in helping to facilitate some of the new financing when you're looking at international expansion. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you've helped companies with, obtaining the resources they need and the capital to help them expand internationally.
Yeah, no, perfect. I think, as mentioned, companies, especially in the food industry, you're dealing with a perishable item sometimes. And so what happens is that it's best to be where you might want to sell. So, sometimes companies will grow or start selling to the US from Canada, and then all of a sudden realize, hey, if I was in the US and processing in the US, I would have greater access and I would have the ability to maybe grow faster because I'm there. And so a lot of the companies I'm dealing with these days are doing just that. So they're going to set up shop overseas. But what happens when they do that, banks in Canada are really afraid to lend outside of Canada. Why? Well, because the assets will remain outside of Canada. And it's very difficult for the banks to realize on those assets in the event that there's a claim scenario, meaning they demand on the loan. So really what banks want from us is they often will come to us, well, maybe on their own or maybe through the customer suggesting it, or prospect suggesting it, is that they come to us to ask for a guarantee. We can provide guarantees to all the banks in Canada, most of the banks in Canada, to help support them with that. So what does that mean? That means that they can get 100% guarantee from us. So you can set up shop in the US, or you can put inventory in the US, or anywhere else in the world, and they can then treat that inventory or those assets like they were sitting here in Canada, because they have 100% guarantee from us. We're taking all the risk. They're facilitating it all, but we are taking the risk. And so that allows the bank to really, really help you. I've helped a company set up shop in Mexico. The banks locally don't know this company because they just started set up. So they needed a lot of things. They needed money for renovating the space, putting machinery in there. So we gave them an $8 million loan, because the bank was, their current bank was just said, we fund everything in Canada. We are really kind of maxed out. We don't want to take the risk of helping them in Mexico. And so what we did was we provided a direct lend to them. I know this is a bit different than a guarantee. We did the direct lend. We can do two things, direct lend or guarantees, but the direct lend is a really good option when the bank is not willing to do anything. We always give the bank first right of refusal, but they weren't able to do it. So we provided a direct lend for the operation for all of their equipment down there. They were more than happy, because now they're able to go ahead and expand, because they can find a really good base of skilled laborers down in Mexico, which they're having trouble finding in Canada. And so it's been really instrumental with their growth. So there's two ways that we can help finance. One is that we help with your bank treat your assets like they're in Canada by giving a guarantee. But if the bank says, you know what, we're not able to do that, Jessica, we can, for a growth story, we can look at a direct lend. Is it our preference? Absolutely not. But absolutely, it's a possibility. If in fact it's going to lead to monumental growth, it'll lead to more opportunities for Canada, meaning more opportunities for growth within Canada and abroad. Because why do we want to help with these types of situations? Because the money is going to be repatriated back into Canada, which is good for Canada. It keeps money in Canada. Exporting keeps money in Canada. So it's really why we want to support it. Those are two typical ways that we can provide support financially, but for our guarantee, we can utilize that 12 different ways. So I'm not going to bore you all with the 12 different ways, but if you have a way that you need to get financing and the bank is not helping you, we can absolutely look at helping getting you access to working capital. I'll say one last thing. I helped a company a couple of weeks ago in they're manufacturing overseas, like they manufacture in Vietnam. They bring the product here in Canada to sell in front of the North American market. A lot of that inventory is in transit, meaning it's on the ship for a long time before it gets here. The bank was giving zero value for inventory in transit, which was really hampering growth, because they couldn't take advantage of the fact that was inventory. The inventory only got counted once it landed in Canada at their facility. So I suggested to the bank, why can't EDC participate, provide you a guarantee on the line of credit, and now you're able to add in inventory in transit to their margin formulas, to their calculation for their line of credit. And that was a huge win for them. Now they're able to lever, they don't have to wait 2 months or 3 months to get access to that money that was then generated by buying the inventory. They can have access to the money right away while it sits in the water and comes to Canada. And that's especially important today. We all know what's going on overseas with respect to cargo and things taking a lot longer to get to destinations, simply because of both the Panama Canal depth issues of the water, and also because of the Red Sea and all the disruption with the pirates. So things are taking longer, perhaps. So it's some things to consider, ways to leverage money, making sure you use the bank to be the most efficient to allow you to grow.
No, that's great. No, absolutely. There's definitely lots of challenges out there from a supply chain and logistics and transportation. And so we all know that cash is king. And sometimes if it's tied up in the waters, so to speak, it makes it difficult for a company to be able to grow and expand. I just want to tap into something you said that really just resonated with me, and it's all about the growth plan. You said if the company has a growth plan, then you can help them. And so can you tell us a little bit more about growth plan and what would you expect if I had a client that I wanted to bring to EDC that was looking to expand? What would be part of this growth plan, or what would you expect to see within their growth plan?
Yeah, so for us, I guess for two things, for a direct lend purpose, we really prefer a partner preferred approach where we work with a bank. Why? Because it's just easier. We're not a bank. We don't have a lot of employees. We're a very lean organization, and so we really do prefer a partner approach. But if we are looking at a growing company, really growing company that needs access to working capital because they're growing outside or they're buying a company, for example, to merge with, because that will open up more opportunities for them. Maybe it's a complementary product that they're buying, so that's why they need that company. So if those are the types of opportunities that you're facing, we can absolutely help. It just needs to be a growth story. So it's not a 1.1 plus 1 equals 2. We want it to be how much impact can our money, if we directly lend to you, for example, can have for the growth of your company. So if it's a 1 plus 1 equals 7, for example, that is a growth story that we could then probably help. We have to be very smart of how we deploy our capital, because as we said, we're a very lean organization, but we were absolutely happy to help companies that are in growth mode. And I'm seeing lots of these interesting food and beverage companies right now that are in growth mode, have great opportunities with, the big retailers around the world. And we absolutely want to help support that. We also know that there's consolidation in the market, right? I'm seeing a lot of companies being up for sale or having the opportunity to purchase simply because markets are down a bit and it's a good time to buy a company. So if you're thinking about a target and how would that look, how would you finance that, and you're talking to your bank and your bank's just not on board, there are ways that we can help. We could look at a direct lend to help you with that purchase if it made sense, meaning it led to more exporting, it led to exponential growth, and is really key to your business. And if those are the things and that's why you're wanting to make that acquisition, then we can absolutely support.
For sure. Yeah, and I think too, with whenever we talk about growth, financing, resources, having plans in place, all super important. I think the same holds true, not only being planning and having the right support that you bring to EDC, but also with your lender itself, right? And having those open discussions about plans and having the conversations kind of as early as possible, and not just when you are in dire need and need the financing. I know sometimes that happens. It's like, I'll talk to my lender when I need the money and not, before then, which I kind of think is a bit of a miss on the company's part. It's important to have these discussions early and often to really help you plan and prepare for some of the opportunities out there to grow. So I know, sometimes getting financing, growing your business could sound like it's all great and positive, but we all know that there are challenges that kind of come with that and maybe some hurdles along the way. Ashley, did you want to talk a little bit about or share a little bit about maybe what you've seen in that area or something, practical tips or people should
Yeah,
be thinking about?
of course. So, there are some hurdles for Canadian companies who want to grow outside of Canada. And Jessica and I have spent, lots of time going to trade shows and interviewing Canadian companies. Last year we interviewed 437 Canadian companies in the mid-market space, which is a lot in the food business. And the biggest thing that came out of it was they didn't know who to talk to abroad. So connections abroad and market knowledge. And we found out that the further you export from North America, which doesn't include the US, obviously, but there's a significant knowledge gap. It really falls off a cliff. There's language barriers, there's differing import rules and restrictions, all depending on the country that you go to. So, we set a goal for us of demystifying that process because, as I mentioned, we still are going to focus heavily on the Indo-Pacific region. We want Canadian companies to get access to the 4 billion people there. So we're expanding that region into that area. We believe that we'll build out connections by opening up offices. So this year, we're opening up 3 new offices in Japan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. So EDC will have offices there, and that's already in addition to the offices we have. So we have Singapore, Jakarta, South Korea, Australia, China, and India. So we are really saturated in that region, and we're going to focus on the countries within the Indo-Pacific region where we have an existing free trade agreement. So I'll give you a few letters here. It's a CPTPP, which is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Canada has a free trade agreement with a number of countries in the Indo-Pacific region. So we want to maximize the products that are covered under this agreement to get them into that marketplace. It minimizes duties, it minimizes, headaches and issues at the borders. So, that's where I see the biggest hurdles. It's for sure connections, who to talk to, and knowing the place that you're going to.
Yeah, I can totally relate. We see that within our practice as well, and in our companies that we work with, and even companies that, from abroad that are looking to settle into Canada, and we've helped a number of companies in that space. And you can't underemphasize the importance of having those connections, boots on the ground, knowing local laws and regulations, people who know the ins and outs of doing business in the country. So I know we tap into our international alliance quite a bit, and there's a lot of cross-border discussions that happen daily, and it's just a testament to the fact that we are living in a global world, and business flows across borders quite tremendously these days. So I just wanted to touch a little bit about some of the trends. I know you touched on the private label earlier, and I just feel that this seems to be a growing trend. It has been there, but I just feel like there's a renewed focus on the private label, and maybe can we tap into that trend a little bit, and what sort of opportunities might be here locally as well as abroad when it comes to private label?
Yeah. So private label specifically, it continues to outpace all branded product sales growth. So it isn't a new trend. Private label has always been growing, but COVID put immense pressure, and immense financial pressure on people all over the world. So as they look to save money in their shopping bills, they discovered great private label items that were as good or sometimes even better than the national brand that they're used to buying. So since it's outpacing all the growth, there's obviously a naturally bigger opportunity in this space. So I see significant opportunity in center of store items. So innovation, and that could mean renovation, like I mentioned before, with innovative packaging, salty snacks and snacking, meat, deli, bakery items. Those are all hot. So that's some of the things that are growing. The next one is innovation for a clean ingredient deck. So consumers have a natural thirst for what's new, and private label wants that as well. That's something that we should really take into consideration. People want to understand everything that's in their food, and they won't buy products loaded with chemicals anymore. So times have changed, and we encourage companies to change with it, because once you do and put out a clean ingredient deck, you'll find that you have a huge consumer base around the world ready to buy your products. So.
Yeah, it's
And then
definitely one of those. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
and there's one last thing, is of course, private label minimizes risk for companies. Let's just say you'd like to export your products that are very popular in Canada to Indonesia, where they haven't heard of your brand before. You coming into a market like that using someone else's private label helps, minimize the risk. Someone else does all the advertising. You have guaranteed sales. They'll promote your product, and then back here at home, it's overhead absorption. So if you're running a manufacturing facility and you have available capacity, you minimize the overhead absorption through that. You can spread that profitability out over all of the products that you manufacture, including the stuff you sell here at home. So you're using, someone else's private label to maximize the throughput of your manufacturing plant. That makes everything cheaper that you manufacture today, and boosts your overall profitability.
Yeah, that's huge for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think probably some bigger margins to be realized on private label if you get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And just on the clean trend, it's definitely one of those things where less is more on the labels. And so I think from an innovation standpoint, a lot of companies are looking to reformulate how they make their products and looking, shelf stabilization, that sort of thing. And R&D is a big part of that. And I know there's lots of programs out there like the Shred program that helps with the R&D. We've got a lot of companies that we help support with their shred pieces, just because I think that is something that sometimes people aren't aware of when they're reworking formulas, is just definitely an opportunity there to potentially, get some money for making mistakes and learning from them. I feel like sometimes we just leave money on the table, not knowing that these programs exist to help support companies through that process. I do want to just go back to a little bit on the ESG trend, because I think that's definitely big news, hot topic. Everyone's talking about it, especially at the public company level. We see that, there's lots of pressure from a reporting perspective, but I think that it's going to be coming down the pipes to a lot of private companies as well, or pretty much any company that's within the supply chain, essentially. So right now it might be mandated in the financial reporting, and I'm kind of going down financial reporting because that's what I do every day, but it's coming down for public companies quite heavily. But I think private companies are going to have or be in a position to have to report on what they're doing from an ESG perspective to help, I'm going to say funnel up some of those trends and what they're doing and percentages or carbon footprint or whatever it is that they're doing to make this world a better place or better workplace for their people. So they'll have to report up there. But I also see that there's probably some opportunities here where, if companies are thinking about ESG when they are approaching their lenders or when they are approaching EDC, there is a story to tell there. So it's not all for financial reporting. I think there's a lot more to it than that. So maybe if one of you want to talk a little bit about ESG and what you've seen, how maybe it's helped, or things that people should be thinking about that maybe they haven't. Either one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think ESG is really, as mentioned, is very important. I think two things. One is that, banks and people like EDC, we have our ESG, we have our own ESG guidelines and rules, but we also expect that the companies that we invest in with respect to, financing or support in any which way, they also have good ESG practices. Why is this important? Well, we want to be sure that we're not helping support a company that's, degrading land, for example, or not treating their employees properly. It's important for us to, as an organization, to be sure that we know who we're dealing with. So what does that mean? That means, sometimes when a company comes into EDC, we do checks. So we understand who you deal with, who are your buyers, who are your suppliers, who are you as a company, to make sure that we're comfortable with the risk, especially if you're selling to harder markets, meaning markets that perhaps maybe have a bit more challenges with respect to politics, with social, with governance, though, environmental challenges. We really do need to make sure that we understand that you are doing the best you can to ensure that you are following rules and respecting local environmental laws and everything else, to make sure that we aren't supporting somebody that's doing something negative. So for example, if you're selling to the US and it's fairly standard product, we probably won't have a lot of checks beyond making sure we understand your top buyers and we're comfortable with them. But if you start selling to countries in, like, let's say Africa, or you're selling to countries and even in companies in India, for example, they have a bit more challenging. They have some more social dynamic and ESG concerns, for example. So we would be for sure needing to know a bit more. And although today I would say is not as important as Rosanna said for some publicly or privately held companies, ESG is not necessarily like something that is mandated yet. It does make your company a lot more, you have a lot more opportunity for investment. Companies, if you're looking to sell, or you're looking for investors, they're going to want to know, are you doing the right things? Are you really paying attention to the right things with an ESG lens? So that's one thing. It could make you way more profitable. Secondly, financing. So banks might not even want to participate in helping you, even with a line of credit, if they don't feel comfortable from an ESG perspective. So companies, even a smaller company, I've worked with companies of all sorts, helping them devise an ESG plan, putting it in place, putting it in practice, setting employee handbooks in place, putting disclosing information on your own website. These are things that I think you need to consider going forward. There are, people that are consultants that help with these things if you don't have time, because we all know that we're all really strapped with time. But this is something of the future that absolutely companies of all sizes, I would say in the next 5 years, are absolutely going to have to pay attention to. But it just really now kind of depends on certain triggers with an EDC. But going forward, I don't think it's going to be it's going to be every company needs to have some sort of plan or understanding of how they are mitigating ESG risks. And for
I can
ESG, it's environmental, social, and governance is the risks is what we're talking about.
And I can jump in as well to add on to that. So when Jessica's talking about what we're doing at home, I can talk about what you're doing abroad. So if you're manufacturing products then and you want to, and you say, I'd love to sell to Walmart in the United States. Walmart has an ESG compliance program. They expect you to be ESG compliant. If you'd like to make private label for these folks, they're going to want to see your ESG compliance paperwork, or you're not going to be a vendor. And that's how, and that, I think that's where the world is coming to. Is that, is it mandated across the board for every retailer? Not yet. But I'll tell you, when the leading retailers in the globe set an ESG procedure, everybody follows them eventually. So, I mean, if we're looking into our crystal ball, to Jessica's point, 5 years from now, you're going to be mandated by your customers to be ESG compliant. It's not something that you'll have to do on your own. Someone's going to twist your arm. And so I think it's something that we should look at, overall as businesses, just to be ready. If you're ahead of the curve, you win faster. And you don't have to scramble when the time comes, because it is going to come. I think that's our prediction.
Yeah, just a matter of time by the
Yep.
sounds of it. So for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can see it on a small scale as well in terms of consumer preferences themselves and what they choose to buy or associate themselves with, right? So you can start seeing it's moving in that direction. And then when you see the big retailers, which are probably the ones you aspire to work with as a company, and if they're mandating it, yeah, absolutely. So definitely start thinking about ESG if you haven't already. And sometimes small incremental changes can make a huge difference. And it does take time to be ESG compliant, but definitely should be thinking about that. Okay. So I just thought maybe before we open it up for questions, I thought it'd be nice if each of you could maybe leave our audience with one piece of advice. So if companies are looking to expand internationally, what would be sort of your one piece of advice that you like to give to our audience, or tip?
I'll give you a tip. It's give us a call. Give us a call if you're if you're unsure. It's we're a phone call away. And then, one thing I'll leave everybody with is we have a no wrong door policy, here at EDC. If we don't have the answers, or if we can't help you, we'll find somebody who can. Our sole mission and goal is to help Canadian companies export and export more. We have a full series of partners all over the world, from Canada's Trade Commissioner Services to embassies to feet on the ground. And, it's resources at our fingertips. We have, market data, information, etc. All those things are yours. And like we say, no wrong door. If I don't have the answer, we'll find someone that does, and we'll refer you to those people. And our sole goal is to watch you succeed. So I think that's what I can leave people with.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. And I think for me, the number one piece of advice is kind of, Rosanna already alluded to it earlier, is really treat partners that help you with your company. So whether it be your accountant, or whether it be your banker, or whether it be something like EDC or your trade commissioner service, treat them like a partner, in that call them when you're making like really big plans within your business. Call them when you are changing course, meaning, oh, I'm starting to do more branded, for example, or I'm starting to do less branded and more private label, or I'm deciding to start setting up shop in a new country, or things like this. treat them like a partner. Why is that beneficial? Well, first of all, everyone will be on your journey together with you, so they can tell you about the risks and point out opportunities along the journey to help you, guide you in the right way, so you are successful with that, whatever that course change might be. But also, it allows the banks and everybody not to scramble. So what I always hear, customers come in and say, Jessica, I need money tomorrow. I said, well, banks and EDC don't work that fast. Absolutely, we'd love to help you, but it's going to take some time. Why didn't we chat about this? When you started having your sales guy talk to this new buyer, we should have been involved at that time. And so I really want to stress, treating people I know that are outside of your corporation like they're insiders is really, really key. And I think will help you grow. I've seen the most success from my companies around, 5 million to 20 million. The ones that are most successful and growing the quickest do that. They call me, Jessica, I don't know if you can help me, but who do you think I should talk to about this? Or here's a risk that I have. Who can help me mitigate it? Maybe EDC can't. Maybe I can tell you Intact can, or maybe I can tell you somebody else can. We are here to help really guide companies, and just treat us like we're an insider is what I would say.
I love that. Thank you both for that. I definitely think surrounding yourself with the right people or connecting and really tapping into your existing relationships and your network to help you is going to be huge. And I'm going to say last but not least, do your homework. I think we said that enough times during today's session, but it really is all about doing your homework and planning for this event, you say. So thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Jessica, for all your insights shared today. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you listeners for tuning in today. I guess we'll just take a brief pause to see if there's any questions for us. Or if not, this is your time to ask questions.
We might be getting off easy here.
We might.
Yeah.
I don't see anything in the chat. Does anybody else? Okay, well, if there's no questions, we'll just leave it at that. Thanks again, everyone. It was a pleasure. And if there are any plans for international expansion in the near future, we hope that you've learned something from today and have some takeaways to help set you in the right direction and off to a great start. So all the best and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.